For more on this, we want to bring in CBS News senior foreign correspondent Mark Phillips, standing by in London. Mark, we got a bunch of questions because this has become very difficult to follow especially over the past few weeks. There have been so many votes back and forth, fast and furious. What is the latest there?
Well, you've got a bunch of questions. I wish I had a bunch of answers, but the vote here has made things even more complicated. This was strike three, if you will. This was the third time that Theresa May has brought the deal that she negotiated with the EU, a divorce settlement of how the UK would leave the EU. It was a little bit different this time. She left parts out that were even more contentious than what was in it, but the result was that she lost anyway. She lost today by 58 votes. The last time this was put, she lost by 149. The last time before that was over 200, 230, I believe. So she's getting closer, but she's still a long way off. And right now, the big question is, what does this mean? You made reference to the fact that Parliament, which has taken the agenda, the Brexit agenda, away from her, will on Monday vote on a series of what they call indicative votes, various options, how to go ahead, how much of a closer relationship to have with the EU, and that kind of thing. But they're only indicative votes, and the last time they did that earlier this week, there was no particular option that carried a majority. So there is no path at this point toward Brexit. Today, you'll remember, was supposed to be Brexit Day. 11 o'clock tonight was supposed to be the drop-dead day, at which point the UK would leave the EU. That was extended for 2 weeks, and now the deadline is the 12th of April. That now is the active deadline, although, as you also say, the EU has now called a summit for April 11th, the day before that, to try to come up with something. But it's the old expression, if a week is a long time in politics, in Brexit politics, 2 weeks is an eternity, and virtually anything could happen from this point, from a long extension for a year or even more to an absolute hard fall off the edge of a cliff Brexit in 2 weeks' time. You can pick your bets.
Yeah, no, and I'm surprised because I thought that her attempt to win over some of the hardliners by saying that if they pass this plan, she would step down, would win over some conservative members of her party. Didn't happen. We just showed pictures there of folks outside of Westminster, and I can't tell if they're protesting, if they're for Brexit or against Brexit. I'm trying to get a look at some of the signs. Maybe it's a combination of both. But, you would have thought, Mark, that deal that she offered the conservative members of the party would have gone along with it.
Well, some did. That's why the margins were closer this time. But the hardcore Brexiters, the kind of Taliban Brexiters, if you will, the purists in this, who won't accept anything other than their version of a complete break from the EU, still reject this deal, saying it retains too many ties to the EU. It still leaves the EU in control of too many aspects of British life, the European Court of Justice, various trade deals, and that kind of thing. So yeah, she as one of the newspapers here put it this week, she fell on her sword, but she missed.
That's so very good for Fleet Street. You gotta love Fleet Street.
Well, but the result is that nobody knows exactly what that means in terms of her departure. Her career would appear to be over, but how long it drags on for now is anybody's guess. She said she would leave after the withdrawal agreement, which was what was voted on today, was concluded. It has not been concluded. Does that mean she doesn't go now? She's under huge pressure to leave. Others are lining up to try to replace her. There's concern on both sides of the Brexit issue as to who those people might be and what might happen if any of them moves into Downing Street.
That's what I wanted to ask you, because, to remind people, this sort of landed in her lap after the referendum, and the previous prime minister said, okay, well, I'm out of here. Right. Then, she did hold an election, and she won, but she didn't campaign on leaving. She wanted to stay. And so here she is with this thing that landed in her lap. Who else would want to take up this argument should she leave?
Well, in the snap election that she called, she won, but she lost. She lost her majority. So she's running a minority government here. She's propped up in power by a party from Northern Ireland, which is very much on the Leave side of the agenda, but which won't countenance this Irish backstop thing that I won't get into at this point. And they, in fact, voted against the proposition again today. So yeah, you're right. She was a lukewarm campaigner, I must say, on the Stay side, on the Remain side during the campaign. But her famous phrase, once she assumed the leadership, which was almost a coronation rather than a contest after David Cameron left and the other potential candidates self-destructed one by one, she was the last person standing. And her phrase at that point was, Brexit means Brexit. The problem is nobody knows what Brexit means, so it's a complete conundrum going forward. What the Leavers are now saying, the staunch Leavers are now saying, is that whoever replaces her, whenever that happens, and the betting is now kind of, well, it's probably changed as a result of today's vote, but sometime over the summer, is that the negotiations from this point on, from their point of view, would be better carried out by someone who actually was a committed Leaver, and they see her as having approached the whole Brexit thing as a damage control operation, which many people would agree with, but they don't see it that way.
So, Mark, real quick before you go, you highlighted really what the two options are, right? April 12th, the UK could decide that they're just going to leave without an agreement in place, which is potentially chaotic and could be economically damaging to Britain, or they can ask European leaders for another extension. What are you hearing might be the outcome?
Well, I wish I could give you an answer, but I can't. Yes, today's vote means that the current leave date is the 12th of April, but it was always assumed that if this vote didn't go through, there would be a request for a longer extension, and that means further complications because there are EU elections to the EU Parliament, which take place later in May. The British who had not wanted to participate in that election, if there is an extension beyond the 12th of April, which everybody thinks they'll have to ask for because nobody wants a no-deal cliff-edge departure, that they will now have to hold those elections. That was one of the arguments going into today's vote. Well, if you don't vote for this deal, the extension could go on into the distant future, a year or even 2 years down the road. That is exactly what people who want Brexit say is the danger, that you'll never get Brexit at all, which is why some of them supported the vote today, but clearly not enough of them.
Just very quickly, Mark, is anybody talking about the possibility of a second referendum?
There's talk. It's on the list of options that were voted on this past week. It got more votes, or as many votes as any other potential option, but still not a majority of votes. There are other possibilities of a closer or looser customs union, kind of common market, free tariff, free trade zone within Europe, but there are complications regarding that as well. Yes, there's talk, but there's no majority for it right now. And if it were to come to that, it wouldn't just be a simple question of do you want to remain in the EU or leave. It would now be complicated by arguments over democracy. Well, didn't our vote count the last time? And if you're going to have 2, are you going to have 3? Let's make it best out of 7. So, there's that kind of discussion going on. So, every time we think there's going to be a definitive conclusion to this, the options seem to get broader and it seems to get more complicated.
Yeah, so true.
Mark, thank you so much for providing that clarity in your reporting. We appreciate it. We know that you'll be reporting more of this on the evening news tonight. Thank you.
For the rest of our lives.
Thanks, Mark.